The honeybee as a species, and there's many different types of honeybee, but generally they are suffering. And there's a lot of research done, and a lot of the research done here at Core about why they are not faring well. And it's many different factors playing out at once.
I think a lot of people will probably recognise that the biggest one is the lack of forage, the lack of flowers that compared to what they used to be. Agricultural intensification during the 20th century has led to the loss of something like 98% of our wildflower meadows. So we used to grow fields that would be cut for hay, and before the introduction of nitrogen fertiliser they were full of flowers, but the nitrogen fertiliser has meant that the grass have outcompeted the wildflowers, and we just don't have that. We have fields of grass now, whereas we used to have fields that were maybe about 15 or 20% wildflowers.
There's the pesticides and the herbicides, the chemicals that we use in farming are affecting them. They're very delicate organisms, and they get very easily affected by these chemicals which affect their ability to thrive.
A lot of pesticides will have sublethal effects, so they won't necessarily kill a bee straight away, but they'll affect its ability to navigate and to forage. And I think very often pesticides can maybe be the straw that breaks the camel's back, so an animal that's already struggling doesn't have the habitat, doesn't have the food in the quantity or the quality that it needs, and then gets a dose of pesticide. So it's a complicated combination of factors.
One of the things that I think we're all waking up to is people have a very natural affection for the bee. The bee has been around for hundreds of thousands of years, and it's an extraordinary creature. The way the bee works, it works in cooperation. The whole hive operates as a kind of community. And I think that symbolically it touches people's hearts that this small animal does so much work. If you take a quarter of a teaspoon of honey, that little bit of honey is what one worker bee does in her whole lifetime. So you have this picture of an animal that is travelling all over the landscape, gathering nectar and pollen, and bringing it back to the hive to feed the brood and to store as honey.
Well, the biggest issues of modern day beekeeping, of course, are the environment. Industrial farming has wiped out the meadows and other environments. You've got the diseases like foul brood, which have always been around, but because of commercial farming of beekeeping, that has spread. And then, unfortunately, you've got all the foreign parasites. The poor old European honeybee had got enough problems as it was, but now you've got parasites coming from the Far East.
And everything is built so precisely, you've got to be careful when you try to get a frame out, otherwise you end up squashing bees everywhere. That's a nice frame. Nice.
You've got to realise that before European honeybees were taken to America and Australasia, there weren't honeybees in these countries that produce the amount of honey. And of course the Americans, as everything, they industrialised it, and I don't like the way they keep bees, and in some ways they've, you know, like they have with intensive farming of any animal, they've brought with it problems. The problem is with commercial beekeeping is that a lot of them make their money out of taking the bees to the pollen, like the almonds in California, where hundreds of thousands of hives go. And of course, densely populated, good way to spread diseases throughout the country.
At the moment that people have arguments for using pesticides in agriculture, and we couldn't just suddenly switch. There's got to be long-term changes made to wean agriculture off pesticides. But in people's gardens, there just isn't a case to. There's just no reason to use insecticides.
And of course there's all the problems with the genetic crops and the genetic modified, pesticides that unfortunately will kill everything. But it's a difficult balance between the farmers need to kill the pests and the bees need to collect food from that environment.
Neonicotinoid is a nerve poison, so it affects the nervous system of the insect and its brain. And as far as we can see in bees, it appears to impair their ability to forage and to navigate, which could ultimately lead to death, because if a bee can't feed, if it can't find its way home, it's not going to have a good chance. It's going to mean, in the case of colony bees, things like honeybees, it will mean a gradual decline in the health of the colony as well if the individual bees in that colony are exposed to neonics when they're out in the field foraging.
They were obviously working some flowers that were sprayed, and it just killed thousands of them. You came back to a pile of dead bees outside the front of your hive. They got back and they just died from the insecticides. It's clearly been stated if the honeybees disappeared that food production would dip tremendously in certain fruits. It's not going to affect the wheats and the barleys, but it will affect everything else.
Without the bee, we wouldn't be able to enjoy half of the foodstuffs that we eat. All of the vegetables that are growing around me here that have flowers and require pollination, many of them rely on the honeybee. So if the honeybee suffers, so do we.